Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavato Brahman Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Hare Adbhuta Karmana Hare Adbhuta Karmana Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Durvibhavyam Ivahati Durvibhavyam Ivahati Durvibhavyam Ivahati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam Kavivish Shapi Chestitam Kavivish Shapi Chestitam Durvibhavyam Vivabhati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Durvibhavyam Vibhavati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Durvibhavyam Vibhavati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam
Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Durvibhavyam Ivabhati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam
Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Durvibhavyam Ivabhati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam
Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Durvibhavyam Ivabhati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hare Adbhuta Karmana Durvibhavyam Ivabhati Kavivish Shapi Chestitam
Nunam Still insufficient. Bhagavata of the personality of Godhead. Brahman, O Lord Brahma. Hare of the Lord. Adbhuta, wonderful. Karmana, one who acts. Durvibhavyam, inconceivable. Eva, like that. Abhati, appears. Kavivi, even by the highly learned. Cha, also. Api, in spite of. Chestitam, being endeavored for. Translation. O Lord Brahmana, The transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful, and they appear inconceivable, because even great endeavours by many learned scholars have still proven insufficient for understanding them. Please repeat. O learned Brahmana. The transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful.
The transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful.
And they appear inconceivable.
And they appear inconceivable.
Because even great endeavours by many learned scholars
Because even great endeavours by many learned scholars
have still proven insufficient for understanding them. This is Sutta speaking, I think, Sutta Goswami. Speaking to Shamakrishi. Oh no, it's a frequent Maharaj speaking to Sukadev. Okay. I'm very sorry, I haven't prepared. I didn't realise I was giving class today. And I was up till midnight last night painting. But nonetheless, it's a very wonderful purport and verse in purport. And just a quick comment before I read the purport. This how he's saying here, all wonderful. There's two ways you can take that statement. Like everything he does is wonderful, or all wonders in those pastimes. The pastimes are just so amazing. And if we analyse Krishna's pastimes, we look at Krishna's pastimes and the things he does. It's just, and the point that's being made here is like even great learned scholars, they just cannot understand them. We were just talking, actually my son was mentioning this at the table yesterday, he was talking about the different activities the Lord does. And if you relate them to a non-devotee, it's all just mythology, just like the story of Lord Chaitanya when he was performing one of his pastimes at Mokgachi, he put some mango seeds in the ground, and they just immediately started to grow and just bloom full mango trees. And if you tell that to a non-devotee, so it's just mythology, or the what's that? The tree in Jagannath Puri, the Siddhabaku. So that's also quite an amazing tree. That tree, every day they offer these twigs to the Lord for cleaning his teeth in Puri. They're called Dantakasta. Danta means stick and kasta. Danta means tooth and kasta means stick. Just a stick for cleaning his teeth. And they sent them with camphor and all sorts of nice fragrances. So someone bought Mahaprabhu that stick and he stuck it in the ground, and immediately it grew into the Siddhabaku tree. And so, the pastimes of Krishna when he's a child, when he killed Putana. He's just like a baby. He's still just crawling, and he sucks out the life of this great. Which, if you tell that to someone who's not aware, they think, "Oh, this is still mythology. How can you believe these things?" But for a devotee, these things are amazing. We're just like, "Wow, Krishna, he did that." Whenever we hear these stories in the Krishna book, we're just amazed at the wonderful things Krishna does, but also the wonderful way that Krishna interacts with his devotees. The way he lovingly exchanges with his devotees. And this whole discussion here is a very powerful demonstration of the wonderful way that Krishna is interacting with his devotee. Because you just imagine, if you were told you had 7 days left to live, how would you deal with that? You'd probably, at least, many people are going to be running around, I need to do this, and you've got this whole list of things you want to achieve before you die. And I think the non-devotees, they call them bucket lists. They have all these things they want to achieve before they die. So they had this notification they're going to die in so many days. They'll be running around trying to achieve all these things, trying to satisfy their senses. But Parikshit Maharaj doesn't do that. And even I think the Maharaj was describing yesterday that the Brahmana's son, Shringi's father, actually came to Parikshit Maharaj after he found out that his son had cursed Parikshit to die, and he said, "I'll counteract the curse if you like." And Parikshit was, "No, I see this as Krishna's arrangement." And he was peaceful. He was peaceful with with the situation, and he was willing to just accept whatever had happened as the arrangement of the Lord, and just use it as an opportunity and an impetus to take shelter of the Lord more fully. And this is a sign of a great Vaishnava, is rather than trying to counteract material situations, they just accept it as the will of the Lord. And Parikshit understood, he didn't know what the Lord's plan was, but he understood that Krishna had a plan here. And we see what the plan was. The plan was to speak the Bhagavatam, which is such an important scripture, it's such an important occurrence that Parikshit was instrumental, in a sense, in the Bhagavatam being delivered. Because Mahaprabhu, he's glorified this book as being the Amma Purana. There's a nice verse in the beginning, Krishna Svadam Bhagavate Damagana Visa Kalanashta Dushamana Puranako Denodata. It says this Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun. And it's arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna and his own abode, accompanied by knowledge, religion, etc. So when Lord Krishna returned to his own abode, knowledge, religion, wisdom, all this sort of stuff that left with him. And we see when Kali Yuga entered, so many bad qualities start to manifest. Krishna is holding back the tide of Kali Yuga, and also we see Yudhishthira Parikshit holding back the tide of Kali Yuga. But as soon as Krishna left, all these good qualities have just diminished, practically vanished. And it says, persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance since the age of Kali. And if we look around, that's practically speaking, everyone in this creation, in this world, has no idea what this world is about, what life is about, what their purpose is. They've got no idea at all. There's so many hedonistic philosophies: eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you will die. They all live by that kind of motto. But the Bhagavad is declaring earlier on the Bhagavatam, says that persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali will get light from this Bhagavad Purana. So this is the point, that this book is the Bhagavatam is so significant, so important for us. And this is just what this pastime is about. It's precipitating the appearance of the Bhagavatam. So I've just and the point the point that Parikshit was saying, that learned scholars they can study this. There's that Punavana it mentions in the Brahma Samhita how yogis may drill their respiration for countless lives, but they still can't even approach the tip of the toe of Lord Sri, the Supreme Person of God, because they don't even understand what He is. They don't even accept His existence half the time. So they don't actually understand. So even these learned scholars, they can't understand. Now this is quite a lengthy purport. It goes on for more than 2 pages. So anyway, I'm not sure if I'll read it all, but I'll read some. The acts of the Supreme Lord in the creation of this, the acts of the Supreme Lord in the creation of just this one universe appear inconceivably wonderful. And if you read this chapter is called Process of Creation, you'll see in this chapter and other parts of Bhagavatam, there in the 5th canto, there's quite amazing descriptions of how the universe is created. And again, if you share these descriptions with non-devotees, they're just going to think we're crazy. So how the Lord expands and then expands, and so expansion lies down and falls ocean. And then from he goes to sleep, he goes into yoga nidra, and from his body all these like golden threads come out, or golden bubbles sort of come out, and they coagulate as golden threads, and they sit down in the causal ocean. And then he expands and he enters into each one of those as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And then Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is in each one of those countless billions of universes. And it's hot. So what happens when it's hot? You sweat. And he fills the universe's half with water. Water sweat. Like this universe we're in is 4 billion miles across, so figure it out, how many litres is that of sweat? But, I don't know if you've had an experience where you really worked hard and you sweat a lot, you feel quite depleted. We feel drained, but Krishna doesn't feel like that because he can expand himself unlimitedly, but he's not affected by that, he's not minimized by that. So, you can explain the whole, and then from his navel comes up, this lotus stem grows out from his navel, and then the lotus flower, and Brahma appears in the lotus, and then, he starts the secondary creation, so if you explain all this to non-devotees, that they can't get it, they just can't get it. But for a devotee, we just look at it and we marvel at how wonderful, how great, how powerful Krishna is, that he can just, through a thought process, create the whole universe. I'm sure Mahamudra would like that, every time he thinks about it, how it just pops up. It'd be nice, But no, he has to put so much work and endeavor into it. And there are innumerable universes, and all of them aggregated together are known as the created material world. And this part of the creation is only a fractional portion of the complete creation. The material world stands as a part only, ekansa stitha jagat. Supposing that the material world is a part of is a display of one part of his energy, the remaining three parts consisting of Vaikuntha Jagat, or the spiritual world, described in the Bhagavad Gita as Mad Dhaman, or Sanatan Dham, or the eternal world. We have marked in the previous verse that he creates and again winds up the creation. This action is applicable only in the material world, because the other, greater part of his creation, namely the Vaikuntha world, is neither created nor annihilated. Otherwise, the Vaikuntha Dham would not have been called eternal. The Lord exists with Dharma, his eternal name, quality, pastimes, entourage, and personality are all a display of his different energies and expansions. And this is also mentioned in the Upanishads, how it says Parasya Shakti Vividaya Shriyate, that Krishna has unlimited potencies. And for everything he does, there's a different potency that takes charge. Just like, when he wants to do something, he wants to create something, he's Kriya Shakti, Kriya means doing. So it does things for him. Or when he's doing pastimes, that there's what's the pastime Shakti called? And it's a pastime Shakti, I can't remember. Sorry, I'm just going to be blank on it. So there's a Shakti that enacts the pastimes, and then in Vrindavan there's so many Lila Shakti, So his Lila Shakti carries out different pastimes. And he has so many different potencies that are acting in so many different ways, whereas he himself, it's just like, in this material world, if someone wants to do something, they have to work so hard to get it done. But Krishna just thinks about it. And even sometimes we see, like, there's that wonderful story described in the 10th canto in Krishna, of when the calves and the cowherd boys enter into the mouth of Akasura. Now, there's a section there where Krishna just looks and he becomes stunned. Some interpret that means he's bewildered, he doesn't know what to do. But the acharyas, they interpret that, they look at it and say, what's happening here is Krishna is just amazed at how his Lila Shakti is working and how his internal potency, Yoga Maya, is working. Because the cowherd boys, they're just entering into the mouth of this demon. They kind of know it's a demon. But the thing, Krishna, because Akasura's got his mouth open, and it describes how the mouth is touching the sky, touching the clouds. And he's breathing, and obviously, like snakes don't have the most, desirable eating habits. They eat all kinds of, abominable things, and then they sit in their stomach and they just rot. They don't have like, human, how you've got, these things that the epiglottis and stuff which closes the throat and that, and there's all these sphincters down here and bells. They don't have that. They just have a one sort of constant sort of stomach, so you can smell what's in their stomach. So, and the snake's breathing and they can smell this horrible, like fishy smell that's coming out of his mouth, and they think, this looks like a big snake. And let's go in and have some pastime. Don't worry, Krishna will save us. They're knowing that Krishna's going to save them, and yet they enter into the snake's mouth, and Krishna's just standing, he's looking at him. Wow, my potencies are so amazing. Look what they're doing. They're creating this environment, because they're just creating, the Lila Shakti is just creating this situation whereby there's going to be some exchange. between Krishna, some loving exchange between Krishna and his devotees. And this is the thing, it's like you'll always see like this exchange here between Parikshit and Krishna. You know, Parikshit saw Krishna in the womb. When he was in the womb of Uttara, the womb was attacked by a Brahmastra, and actually the embryo was destroyed. And Krishna praised God to rebuild the embryo. But Parikshit saw Krishna in a four-armed form, and his discus was whirling around creating like this circle to protect him, you know, and to rebuild the embryo. And so since that time, he wasn't sure who it was, but he was looking. That's why he's called Parikshit. Parikshit means the inquirer. He was looking for who that was that protected him in the womb. And then, you know, he understood quite young who it was. He understood it was Krishna. He was still looking for that person. So he was actually a very, very great devotee. So even from the beginning of his manifestation in his body, he had this relationship with Krishna. And so when this point came of leaving his body, he wasn't disturbed by it. He wasn't worried that, oh, now I'm going to leave my body, what am I going to do? He didn't become bewildered. So many people become bewildered. But great Vaishnavas, they don't become bewildered because they know. You know, and what's the reason for the bewilderment? The reason for the bewilderment is uncertainty. They don't know what the future holds. They don't know what's next. And many people, when they die, are quite fearful, they're quite distressed. Now, this is kind of a really interesting segue, I guess, because as most of you know, Pankajamrita left his body yesterday. And I don't know how you watched the final ceremony, his last rites last night. It was quite interesting because I've done last rites from many devotees, and oftentimes, when you're washing the body and stuff like that, it's stiff, you know? And that usually happens quite quickly. The rigor mortis, they call it, stiff. One thing I was noticing that his body wasn't stiff. And they say this is a sign that someone's greatly advanced. Now, I don't know, I can't comment on that because I'm not greatly advanced. But then, it just, for me, it's a point of reflection, deep reflection. I knew Pankajamrita quite well, and Janavas quite well, and had many nice exchanges with him over the years. I hope you don't mind, I just want to use this as an opportunity to glorify a dear friend. One of the things that I really appreciate, and if anyone else who knows Pankajamrita would like to contribute, I'm happy to hear their experience of Pankajamrita. One of the things that stood out for me with Pankajamrita, he was just a really down-to-earth person. He was a very practical, to get the job done sort of person. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know how many of you know Ishvara. Ishvara lives in the community here. He's been around for a long time. He used to be a temple president here many years ago. He and Janavas and Pankajamrita, they all grew up together in a place called High Barnet. It's a suburb in UK. And it's kind of interesting because many devotees have come from that. There's also a devotee there, what's his name? No. Who was the optometrist in the UK. I can't remember his name. He actually made a pair of sunglasses for me a few years ago. He left his body. But he was also from High Barnet. There's quite a lot of devotees. A couple of devotees come from High Barnet too. Yeah, but there was quite a few devotees who came from that area, and so Janavas joined. He went to India in I think 1970. He was traveling around India looking for the answers, and then he somewhere or other he bumped into, I can't remember if it was Vishaka or Malati in India, and she invited him to the program that Prabhupada was doing, this Pandal program that Prabhupada was doing. He went every day, which is completely, it might have been the Pandal program he did in Calcutta. And then so he went to, he joined the temple there, and he went to Mayapur, they sent him to Mayapur, because actually it was in Calcutta because Radha Madhava were there at the Pandal, and then he sent them to, Prabhupada sent them to Mayapur. And so, you know, Janus was there, and he at the time he was reading the Chaitanya Bhagavatam, and there was a prayer how Thakur Haridas was praying that, you know, with every fibre of my body, with every breath I take, I just want to worship you. And then so he thought, wow, that's such an amazing prayer. And then he went to Radha Madhava, and he said, as long as there's a breath in my body, with every fibre of my body, I want to serve you, my Lord. And the next day, the temple president came to him and said, oh, you're the head pujari now, this pujari is going back to England. So he became the head pujari. And then so he started to worship Radha Madhava. And, you know, he was on his own. And at one point, Prabhupada, I'm not sure the chronology of this, at one point, Prabhupada said to Bhavananda, who was the manager at this time, he said, he's just an ordinary man, he cannot do it on his own, he needs some help. So Janus was thinking sometime around that time that it'd be really nice if his brother came, because there was no false ego between them. They cooperated. I mean, if anyone ever seen them together, they were just like two peas in a pod. You know, they were just so symbiotic in their relationship, and they just worked so well together. So anyhow, Pankajari, he joined the manor in 1973. And a few months later he went to Mayapur, and he was in Mayapur ever since then. So 48 years. You know, Janus 50 years in Mayapur. I remember we celebrated his 45th anniversary of being in Mayapur just recently. But yeah, so Pankajari was 48 years in Mayapur. Imagine that, 48 years just for the same service. And Janus 50 years. And so, you know, just observing the two of them and the way they work together, they had such a loving relationship, so sweet. I've known them maybe getting close to 30 years, I guess, maybe more. And I never saw them argue, I never saw them have a crossword, I never saw them, you know, I mean, they definitely had differences of opinion. But and that's one of the things that I was noticing here in this verse and purport is how respectfully they deal with each other. And I remember Jonas was telling me years ago that he just wanted to live his life as a Vedic Brahmin. So being a Vedic brahmachari, following Vedic culture means respect. This is one of the essences of our culture is respect. You learn how to respect. You understand the relationship between everything, and you learn how to respect based on the relationship. And that doesn't apply just to people, that applies to objects also. You learn how to utilize things in Krishna service, because that's what they're there for. So that's one of the things I noticed with Pankajari and Janus in the relationship was that there was such deep respect between them. They genuinely loved each other. There's no doubt of that. And just so many nice exchanges there with Pankajari. I remember when I was based in Perth, and Pankajari came. I think he came to Australia twice. The first time he came, I was in Perth, and he came to Perth and many nice classes, and one of the classes I remember, someone had asked him about his past life, before he joined ISKCON, and without any pretension or any look at me or anything like that, he just said, I was just a regular dog, and he meant it. He wasn't sort of trying to put it on or draw attention to himself. He just meant that I was just so low and forward, and that really sort of stuck with me. And then I remember that visit, I was asked to take him to the airport, and it so happened that his flight was in the wee hours of the morning, so we just stayed up and talking, and we just naturally talk about deity worship, and we talked about hours and hours and hours, because his whole life was just dedicated to serving the deities. Initially, he was just serving Radha Madhava. You can see photographs. I don't know if any of you have been on Facebook and had a look. There's many photographs of Pankajari and Janus together, and you can see the photos of them serving, the small Radha Madhava, about 2 foot tall Radha Madhava deities in Mayapur together. And so then, as the worship expanded in Mayapur, then they got the large lot of deities, then Lalita, Vishaka, Tunga, they got 4 sakis, and then so they were engaged in that, and then later Nrsimha came. Then when Nrsimha came, they were trying to find someone to worship Nrsimha, because everyone was a little bit sort of spooked. There's like really fearsome kind of deity of Nrsimha. And he's ripping apart Hiranyakashipu. The form Nrsimha in Mayapur is called Sthana, and in the column Ukra Nrsimha. So this is Ukra Nrsimha, just as he's burst out of the column. This is when he's at his most angry. And so the managers of the temple was saying, well, who'll worship him? They're having a meeting, and Pankaj said, I'll do that. No fear, no, just stream it, I'll do that. And like Shanagasa and Pankaj, you can see sometimes there's a real playful, childish kind of mood about them. And Pankaj said, I'll do that. And ever since, I can't remember what year Nrsimha was installed, but ever since he was installed, he's been engaged in worship. And extraordinary, actually, because if you think of it, how many of us have not contacted Pankajangri in some way? Thousands of devotees around the world have requested Pankajangri to offer prayers for them, or for their family members, or for their friends, or for loved ones. And every morning you see him there with tulsi leaves, the names, like you have the names of the devotees, and he's chanting, I think it was 108 names in Nrsimha, or 1,000 names in Nrsimha, just each name offering a prayer. And sometimes he'd be there for hours offering these prayers on behalf of devotees all around the world. I know myself many times that, like someone who's dear to me has been going through some difficulty, and even my non-devotees, my wife's mother, and just different friends that have been in difficulty, we contact the Pankajangri, can you do a puja? Straight away, he can't do it. And sometimes he'd be there, like generally he would start after the Bhagavatam class, and sometimes he would be there up till 10 o'clock. So he'd skip breakfast, and he just, without any hesitation, he'd do these things for devotees. And I remember years ago he used to make up all the kavachas, those little capsules. He'd make them all up himself, and later on he got other devotees to do it. And he'd be at that for hours and hours and hours. So it's just a selfless offering to devotees. And this is one of the things that really stuck in my mind about Pankajangri, is just this selfless attitude. And I never heard him say, I'm too busy. Never heard that. Whereas like someone might ask me, can you do this, can you do that? I just have so much on the plate, I just can't take it on. No, he'd always just do that. And also, this is something that, for those of you who worship the deities here, when you have to travel, one way that you can continue that relationship without feeling separation, he would always travel with a picture of Nrsimha, because he'd travel every few years. It's kind of interesting, I can say it now because it's out a long time ago. Years ago, what used to happen was because HG Nrsimha didn't leave Mayapur until this thing with the TOVP started. He'd never been outside Mayapur. I think he went to Calcutta twice, and Vrindavan once or twice, but he'd never been outside Mayapur. So what used to happen was like, I think you're allowed to stay in India for 2 years or 5 years or whatever it was, 5 years I think he was on visa. So he'd alternate. One year he'd go out, one time he'd go out as Pankajangri, and the other time he'd go out as Jnanadas. And no one ever knew the difference, And I even know myself, it's like, I know them quite well, but like, I found that when I approached them from coming from behind on their right-hand side, on about a 45 degree, I couldn't pick the difference. But if you look at the front, Pankajangri's got so many differences, from Jnanadas, but coming from that angle, I thought, who's this? Just couldn't get it. As soon as they spoke, I knew who it was, And he always, every time I met him, saying, hey, Prabhu. He always addressed me like that. He was really, really affectionate. And, I don't want to bring attention to myself because this is about him. But whenever he'd travel, he'd always take a picture of Nrsimha and an Achman cup. And he'd sit down in the morning, after he'd done whatever he'd done in the morning, he'd sit down and put the picture down, get his Achman cup, and offer 16 items of worship to Nrsimha, just with mantra and water. And so that way he was maintaining his connection with Nrsimha. And wherever he went in the world, he'd always do that. Even recently he was doing it too. And yeah, so what else can we say about it? Oh, I remember also like one time, because none of us in Pankajana were also very instrumental in establishing Mayapur Academy. And what had happened was we started teaching in Mayapur in 1999, so we built that up over a period of a few years. We got to the point where we had like a temple worship level 1, and we got to temple worship level 2. The temple worship level 2, we had like in the level 1 we just showing devotees how to do the worship. Level 2, we started to assess them. They do the worship, and we'd assess them for doing the worship, like the bathing, dressing, the small deities. And then I had this conversation with both of them sometime after we started about how I had this idea to start a school in Mayapur to train for judges. It wasn't really kind of like, a structured thing like it is now. It was just every year at the corporate in time we'd teach, a few weeks. And then the second time we taught this second level course, I came up and asked Janarasaguru, what do you think of the course? And the only thing he said to me is, when do we start? And I said, what do you mean, Guru? He says, when do we start the school? As soon as you want. And then so, sometime after that, my wife and I had gone to London, and we were coming back from London via Lanka, Sri Lanka, and we stopped in Colombo. And I remember just as I was leaving London, I got a call from Pankajana, and he said, I found a place. And what do you mean? He said, I found a place for school. So I just left my wife in Sri Lanka, Colombo. She flew back to Australia. I went on to Chennai, and then we caught a train, I think, up to Mayapur. We went and checked out the place for school, and that's what it is now. So, and then Pankajana, he was always kind of trying to help to push the education forward. At least I know he does it with the other departments. At least with Mayapur Academy, he had a plan to actually that whole area under Nrsimha's temple. He wanted to turn that into the school. It's a massive area, a really huge area. And so, drawn up plans and everything like that. But then at some point, the design team decided that actually that wasn't the best use of the purpose. So, But he was always looking how to push ahead what we're doing in Mayapur Academy, and always very, very, very helpful there. There's a lot of other things I could say, but I'm wondering if anyone else. Something you know them quite well.
Yes. I could say a lot of things, but I just, because you were there, sitting there, one time I was talking to him, and I knew that you had a very intimate relationship with both of them because you were running the school, and he mentioned to us that you eat all his lunch. He mentioned to us that you eat all his lunch, because you would often go there, and he mentioned, he eats all my lunch.
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting because there was always plenty left. No, he's just playful. I remember also when I first started going to Mayapur after getting Brahman, and I wanted to get on the altar and do service, so every day, because like where Radhamadava's altar is, on one side of the altar there's the room that they call it Shiva's room now, but that actually used to be Janaras's and Pankajana's room, Janaras's room. That was Janaras's room. Then if you go underneath the altar on the other side, which now used as a dress room for the night dresses, that was Pankajana's room. So I used to go there every morning and ask, is there any service? And I did this for days, and then one day Janaras got me polishing. There used to be a name, like on the front of Prabhupada's Vyasasthana, there used to be the letters of Prabhupada, HG Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Gambhijaya ISKCON. So Janaras had me polish those and different things and come back any more service. And then so he gave me all the jewelry of the deities, because like a lot of the jewelry they had in those days was very simple jewelry. It was just buttons and stuff like that. They got me Calcutta, and with the buttons they have little plastic buttons. They have a little kind of loop on the back so you can sew them on. So Janaras had me cut all those off and file them flat. So when you put them, because keep in mind the deities are our size, so, they're 6 foot tall, so you use bigger things. So when you put them on the sakis and stuff like that, there's a little sharp thing pushed against their skin, so Janadas was concerned about that. So having to cut all that off and file them smooth so that the deities wouldn't be hurt by those things. And then I kept going back every day, kept going back. And then one morning Janadas said, okay, tomorrow you can come and dress the sakis. and then I saw Pankajanga sometime later, and he said to me, the first thing he said to me, he says, you're that devotee who doesn't give up. And I try to be persistent in devotional service. And I wrote to him a few days ago, or maybe last week, and just expressed my concern, and was offering prayers. He just writes back, thank you. That was the last communication I had with him. But it wasn't uncommon that he would call, or I'd call, and he'd always call him and he'd go, NK Guru, greetings from my Bodhana. Really consistent, you always knew what you're getting with. Like sometimes you meet some devotees, you just don't know what type of mood they're in, you don't know what's going on for them in their lives, and you just never know sometimes. Pankajanga and Janadas, you always know, they're always consistent. And I was watching like I said, the last rites last night. They finished at that midnight. It was kind of good because while I was waiting for the paint to dry on Balaram's hand, I was watching. And Janadas, he was there, and he was doing the last rite, smearing the turmeric and the mud, coming up, and then he lit the flame. And just like watching Janadas, I could see consistent, the same steady reflection, the same steady kind of deepness that he always has. And Pankajanga, always the same light-hearted, jovial, joking spirit. Ishvara used to call him Jack the Lad, because he just had that. He had a real playful, mischievous kind of nature to him, and it was always there. I remember when they got, because they always used to sit on the floor and do everything sitting on the floor. And at one point, Dayaramaprabhu and his wife, Manjari, thank you, Prema Manjari. They renovated Pankajanga Janadas' rooms and put new flooring and gave them desks and stuff like that. Janadas, they got the desk, he had the legs cut off. But first they sat up on chairs, and they came in the room one day, they're on the wheelies, the chairs with 5 wheels, and they're playing Belgian cards. It's just bashing into each other, It's like, you just never knew what you were going to get into, right? It was just Pankajanga
I want to share that every time we invited them to talk, Pankajanga would always give the honor to Janadas to talk first. He always gave Janadas Prabhu to talk first, to give the talk first before him. When we invited them both, and he treated him as his elder brother, although they were twins. Pankajanga was respecting Janadas as an elder brother. So
he always saw Janadas as his senior.
Yeah.
He always saw him in that way. And there's a few videos floating around on Facebook and YouTube and stuff right now. And the new Satari that they've got in Mayapur, it's got a thin neck on it. The other one was quite wide, the new one's a thin one. And so Pankajanga took it and put it on Janadas for his head, and then Janadas took that and put it on Pankajanga for his head. Ouch, it's too small. He was just like that, he was just always joking. Anyway, so thank you very much. Shubha Pariki, Samaveta Bhakti, Pankajanga Guru Ki, Jai Jai Gopinandi.